Whenever you rent or buy a video, you need to be sure that the film you choose is suitable for the audience at home.
Do sit down. We're just about to have some tea.
Ladies and gentlemen, please do not panic, but scream. Scream for your lives.
Hail weirdos, the kettle's boiled. Welcome to Tea for Terror, where we take a favourite horror film and dissect it over a nice cuppa. I'm your host, Andrew Graves, and my guest today is here to scream his last breath. Welcome, Tim Dry. How you doing, mate?
Hello, I'm good, thank you. How are you doing? Nice mug.
Just having a drink of tea.
So what are we talking about today then, Mr. Gray?
Well, what are we? Well, we'll get to that presently. But we're having a bit of a chit chat there before we started recording. So, you just been telling me you're off to Germany to do some signings and whatnot.
Yeah,
XTRO and Star Wars, Return of the Jedi and stuff.
It's a 3-day. It's called Norris Force Con. It's in Nuremberg, which I have actually visited once before. But they have this every year, and they always get a few Star Wars, veterans along, shall we say. But, the nice thing about this show is they also have graphic artists who've worked on comics or books, some set designers, It's not just, A or B listers from the actual movie. So it's going to be very interesting to see what the sort of response is, because you've got the veterans like there's me, Simon J. Williamson, and a few other people. Curiously enough, Pooh Stark is also an autograph guest.
Wow. And
you think, exactly, wow, really? Well, apparently she had a very small role in the original Star Wars, A New Hope, but it was cut.
Oh, right, okay.
So she's not actually really in it. But for some, interesting reason, they've invited her to do this show as well. So that's going to be interesting, isn't it?
Blimey. No, I've read a fair bit about Star Wars and I've watched a lot of docs, and I didn't know that. I didn't know Q Stark was in Star Wars.
You see. Stick with me, kid, you learn stuff.
Or not in Star Wars, technically.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of bizarre though, isn't it, really? But I guess she needs a weekend out, Hey,
there you go.
Whatever, you know what I'm saying?
So you just put some Tick and Tock stuff out as well.
That's coming out now. It's I released an album back in 2005 called Dream Orphans under the Tick and Tock name. And then I was contacted by this lovely guy called Dave Turner, who decided that he wanted to remaster it and then re-release it now. So I thought, okay, that's brilliant. I gave him the rights to do it, which he very kindly paid me for. And then I thought, well, let's give him something a bit extra. So I had 6 or 7 tracks that I remixed or edited and chopped up, as a second CD. So people think, oh, yeah, great. Well, I'm getting the original album, but now I'm also getting this extra stuff that Tim's done as well. So I thought, okay, let's dispense with the whole original artwork and have created a new set of artwork, which is actually a still from Metropolis, which I
saw that. It was nice still. That
it sort of fitted, So that's coming out. It was supposed to come out August the 1st, but there were lots of problems with the PRS notifications, and it should be out on September the 1st anyway. Limited edition of 300.
Oh, okay. Well, it looks like a nice set. Yeah.
Yeah, I was very pleased because I did all the artwork, that's reutilizing my graphic design skills, such as they are, to just create something. It's got a little fold-out booklet in it and, info about how I recorded the music in the first place. I mean, that was all done on my laptop. And because I came up through the 1980s, if you went into a recording studio, you've got a huge desk, you've got massive speakers, you've got all this outboard kit. tone deaf engineers with a flatulence problem, you know. So being able to suddenly record everything on the laptop, which is this size, unbelievable. And
I don't mean this to belittle anything at all, but I'm always amused by that because it is great. You know, technology has moved on, and there's so much. You know, I wouldn't be able to do this podcast without laptop technology. All this kind of stuff is, you know, I can literally have it in front of me. But I think in some ways, you know, if you listen to a lot of radio and like local radio, and there's always kind of like BBC introducing, where they're introducing new acts, you know, putting them out, and their intros from these new acts, when they ask them to say a bit about themselves, it's always, you know, well, I'm a singer songwriter, a musical producer. And I always think, well, you've got a laptop. That's basically what you're saying.
Yeah, I know. I mean, oh, it's another can of worms, to be honest, but. You know, it's the same people that now are saying that vinyl is so much better than streaming or download, you know. Well, great. I got rid of all my fucking vinyl, use the F word, and then bought everything again on CD, you know, and then transferred that into digital. It's like, oh, what, should I have kept everything? You know, no, sod it.
No,
you know, technology is there to be used. I still, on this Dream Orphans album, I play quite a lot of live guitar. So that's one thing I can do without having to sort of hit a preset. And that was great. I mean, even that was 20 bloody years ago now, but just to sort of sit here rocking out with your headphones on and sounding like a would-be Clapton or Eddie Van Halen. Very exciting. So there's always that element. It's not just programmed. You know, now I read saw a very interesting YouTube article a while back about some producers saying why all of the top 10 or top 20 songs all sound the same. They're all produced by the same people. And there's a sort of preset sound that they know will work on radio, you know, with frequencies and structure. And I think that is disgusting.
Yeah, I think with everything though, I think you've got to delve a bit deeper. You know, there's still stuff going on. There's still an underground. There's still, you know, live music scene, and I think there is.
That's why we have stuff. Oasis back again. You know,
don't want to talk about Oasis.
Well, you know, they're pretty shameless, but there's something very exciting about a live rock and roll band.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you can equate the same thing to cinema. You know, I know it's streaming and blah 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 blah, but there's still nothing like sitting in a cinema full of like-minded people in the dark. There's something slightly tribal about that, and I don't want to sound too, you know, wherever you want to see your films, if you can't get to a cinema, I'm incredibly lucky. So I do a lot of intros and talks at the Broadway Cinema. It's a brilliant cinema. They are very supportive of new films, independent filmmaking, all this kind of stuff, horror, everything, you know. And I understand that not everybody's got that on their doorstep. So if you don't want to be paying like 14 quid to go and sit in a very unpersonalized atmosphere, there's no actual projectionist, it's just a click button machine, and they're trying to sell you as much shit as possible. And I get that you want to see stuff at home, but I think if you can access a decent cinema, there's nothing like it, you know.
Well, that's why, you know, this thing I'm doing on Saturday is at the Lumiere Cinema in Romford, and that, you know, that's a proper cinema with proper seating and projection, but they're actually showing I don't know how many they're showing, but videos that were actually on the video nasty list. You know, I spit on your grave because I'm a zombie Holocaust survivor or something, you know. But I just think that's great. And there's something about horror fans that is quite appealing, really. They're not precious. They know what they like. They like to dress up a bit, you know, a bit of leather, a bit of studs, a bit of tats everywhere.
I think also, you know, I mean, I very much an advocate of 21st century horror. I think a lot of great horror films have been released this century, some brilliant stuff. But obviously, you know, in terms of my age, I'm kind of just, because there's no other way of looking at it, really. I grew up mostly in the 20th century, and those kind of horror films, in that way, I'm kind of old school in that sense. But I think that a lot of horror fans my age who kind of grew up in that sort of golden time, I guess, if you want to call
Yeah.
it that, it's you can talk about cancel culture now, but really, what is cancel culture? It doesn't really exist unless you want it to exist, because yeah, you can cancel you, but it doesn't mean you can't access that thing. That thing is still there to be accessed if you want to access
Yeah.
it. Whereas throughout that whole video nasty debacle where the government was effectively trying to physically ban stuff and
Yeah.
effectively did, yeah, okay, you could probably find bootleg versions, but they were actually physically making something illegal. That's
I
cancel
know.
culture.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't really involved in it, but I know that XTRO was potentially on the list, but it never actually got to the list, which is a shame, really.
But
But
it never fails to amaze me, because it's always these fucking right wing fuckers now that are whining about cancel culture. You invented it. You
yeah,
ushered it in. You tried
yeah,
to
I know.
physically actually cancel stuff
Oh,
because you couldn't bear it.
yeah.
So
I mean,
don't.
how pathetic is that?
Of course it is.
You know,
Well, I'm not the first to have said this, but these right wing cunts that just fucking go on and on about this stuff. It's
fuck
always
'em.
them. They are the biggest snowflakes. They want to paint everybody as snowflakes. They are the biggest snowflakes. Look, who's the biggest snowflake in the fucking world? Donald Trump
Oh,
cries
don't
about
get me
everything.
fucking started. Let's move on from politics, okay? But
Well, we
did you say
will,
no,
but will
snowflake?
we? We
Did you
will,
say
but will
snowflake?
we? Because I think the film we're going to be looking at actually, it's not. I don't think it's political with a huge capital P, but I
Uh,
think
uh,
it's political, and there is social commentary going on here. So yes, the film we're going to be looking at today is the 2005 Neil Marshall film, The Descent.
I told you I saw someone! That was not a human being!
The Descent.
So first up,
mm,
before we go into the film,
yeah.
now there's no getting around the fact that this is. So the last episode, I had director Saxon Logan on. He directed the film Sleepwalker, which was an '84 British horror film, and this
Uh-huh.
obviously is a British horror film as well.
Yeah.
Um, and I think, and we touched upon a few things there, political, social commentary, and things that were kind of very apparent in British horror films, particularly from a certain era.
Mm,
Now, obviously, this is an early sort of 21st century horror film, British horror film, but I still think it carries a lot of those sort of traits. But I'm just wondering, before we get into The Descent as such, how do you, what is it that makes British horror films different, do you think, to other cultures and their take on horror films? Because I think they are
uh,
quintessentially
yeah.
different.
Well, that's a very interesting point. I think a low budget. I mean, I think the budget for The Descent was 3.5 million, which is ridiculous. You wouldn't even get Brad Pitt to shave his knob end for that.
Never asked him,
Oops.
to be honest.
Did I say that? Or just think it? But yeah, it's low budget, so everything has to be done very concisely. Not that I'm thinking about Dog Soldiers, another Neil Marshall movie. I'm thinking about Hellraiser, Hellraiser, Hellbound. Um, what's the other one? A Lonely Place to Die. Do you know that movie?
Yeah.
With the
Yeah.
collectible Melissa George. But to me, these are horror movies. It's what man does to man is inhumane. But they don't need CGI. They don't need flashy effects. They don't need A-listers. And there's something gritty. I mean, I go right back to The Wicker Man. I think that is a kind of masterpiece of understated horror. Now, I know that Barbie Wilde has a big problem with The Wicker Man for reasons that only she can tell you. But
I know. I've had similar conversations with Barbie.
yeah,
I
it's
love Barbie. She's fantastic.
I know
I agree with most of the things she says, but I don't understand
not
that.
not the main objection. Yeah. Then you got things like Don't Look Now. Okay, again, it's Nick Road. You don't need A-listers. You don't need a huge budget. You don't need massive George Lucas-esque CGIs and all that shit to make something that's visceral and really powerful. And it's something that mainly America doesn't tend to do. Everything has to be bigger and louder and flashier. Whereas here, because we're a small island in the middle of whatever, we have to focus on it. And right, we've got to do this. I mean, XTRO is a great example. That the budget for that was probably, God knows, in 5 figures or something. But it works in the same way that other Brit-made, okay, Repulsion, for example, Polanski's Repulsion. I mean, that filmed in Tower Block, not Tower, but Mansion Block in South Ken, Hammersmith Bridge, very little money involved, but it's a visceral movie. It's a woman going through a massive emotional breakdown, And you don't need a lot of dressing to make a point, I don't think.
I think there's something as well about it's I think there is something about Britishness, whatever that is, and by that I'm not talking about this bullshit patriotism, all this kind of stuff. I think there's just something inherently British, and it's whether you're born here or not, or whether your culture's from here. Once you are here, it's in doubt. There's something about it, and I think that, and it because if you think about, there are bigger kind of American productions, but once they've come here, they become absolutely British. There's something about our rainy island, our isolation, what it is to be British, I think, and that infuses itself within whatever production it is. The Omen was a very big American production, but once you bring it over here, and you've got those kind of, it's not necessarily about Gregory Peck or the main sort of American cast. It's about those British character actors like Billy Whitelaw that are on the edges. That's what makes it, similar to, Landis's American Wolf in London. The moment you set it here, it's a British film. It doesn't matter how much American money is in it, it's a British film. And similarly, the other way round, if you look at a lot of those 1930s Universal horror films, particularly James Whale's Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, or Todd Browning's Dracula, they either had British directors like James Whale, or they were full of British character actors. And even though they were filmed in America, in Hollywood, on these big sound stages, there is something quintessentially British about those films. I think there's something about our character, whether it's filmed here or whether you take a bunch of us out there. There's something about this land which you cannot shake off, and it transports wherever it goes. So I think that's the difference, I think.
I totally agree with you, but then you get something like, the original Star Wars trilogy that was obviously filmed here with a British crew, but with Hollywood money and Hollywood actors. And so it doesn't come across as a British movie. It comes across very much as an American movie, just using the technology and the technicians that we have here that for some reason they didn't have in America, which is kind of weird. But no, I take your point. I think there's a whole load of low budget English or British, horror movies that are much more effective. I do come back to The Wicker Man again. Sorry, Barbie, but you couldn't get a more simply filmed movie, could you?
No,
not really. But you've got him going up to Scotland. You've got Chris Lee in a frock. No, I didn't say that, Barbie. But it's all location. Lindsay Kemp one of my mime tutors is in it as the barman. Brilliant. You know, Britt Ekland's not her bum, but hey, we can
Well,
dream.
she was
Yeah.
quite heavily pregnant at the time, so they had to do a lot of
Yeah, but hey, yeah,
shifting around with the camera, I think. So yeah.
I did apologise for that.
Uh,
Sorry, Britt. But you know, that's a classic one. I mean, there's hundreds of them, isn't there? I mean, I don't really count the Hammer ones because they obviously did have the budget for sets and
but yeah, yeah. So The Descent, then. So this is your choice.
yeah,
Good choice.
yeah.
But when was the first time you came across this film?
Oh, well, it would have been when it first came out, which remind me of the year it came out. I can't remember.
2005.
2005. Okay, well, my personal connection to this movie is via a very good friend of mine called Rod Vass, and his company did all the interior structures for the cave. And he has a company called Armor Billow, AMOR Billow. And they did all the armor for Gladiator, and they discovered this means of spraying polystyrene to sculpt and mold, and it dries instantly. I mean, he did send me some info today, which can I read some of it out to you?
Yeah.
Okay, we had several stages at Pinewood and worked into the night to get it all done. We had a fairly free hand with rock finishes and the overall look of the set. Rock masters were carved in polystyrene and hard coated before being molded. Pools were then taken from the molds by spraying in polystyrene foam. Foam cured instantly, so it could be remolded straight away. We pigmented the foam into a dirty rock color, so broken pieces would not be noticeable on screen. He and his company originated this way of creating material from sprayed polystyrene, which you can make it look like metal, you can make it look like rock. So when Rod said he'd been working on this movie called The Descent, I thought, wow, I've got to go and see it. And I didn't go and see it just because of Rod's involvement. And it's Rod Vass, by the way, sorry. But I just found the whole notion behind it terrifying, because I am claustrophobic. I never used to be, but I have now become claustrophobic in adulthood. And so the idea of these people going down willingly into the depth of, you know, the unknown, that's pretty terrifying. It's almost like the interior version of Alien, you know. And in fact, there is some kind of bizarre similarity between the two movies, you know. So I was drawn to it, and as soon as I saw it, I thought, wow, this is probably the most disturbing movie I've seen for a very, very long time, because of that claustrophobic element, and the kind of naivety of people doing dangerous things to get off on it or whatever, you know. And one of the girls decides that she wants to explore this unknown cave so she can name it herself. It's like vanity involved, you know. There's always going to be some downside to that, isn't there? But it just made a change from all the sort of lonely cabin in the woods, you know, something terrible outside, honeymoon couple or something with their kids being terrorized. But this was something very different. You don't see anything apart from claustrophobia for about the first 40 minutes, you know.
Well, it's a really weird one for me, because I the first time I saw it, I wasn't massively impressed by it.
Right.
I think it's very visceral the first time you see it, but that's all I was getting. Like you say, it's all the claustrophobia, it's a physical, that feeling. But then a few years later, well, quite a number of years later, I was asked to write a feature on it for Screen Magazine, and so I went much deeper into it, and I watched it a few times, and I've got much more. I really, really like this film now. I really rate it. And I think because, you know, similar to stuff like Jordan Peele, where it's, something like Get Out is, that works on a surface level. It's a great horror sci-fi film, but also if you scratch the surface, it's an incredibly clever film. And I think that this is a clever film as well, because it's, yeah, I mean, I kind of said it there, surface and below surface. That's
Yeah.
what this film's about, whether obviously that is a physical surface and a physical beneath the surface, but it's also metaphorical, and it's also about human nature. This is, and
Yeah.
also it's about, and what they don't do, which is really admirable, I think, is that you're presenting us with a female-led horror film,
hmm
which is not trying to, which is the temptation of a lot of kind of more modern films now that are trying to sway this political message, if you like, of trying to make up for years of misogyny by presenting every single female character as incredible and brilliant. That's not what this film does. It
No.
presents us
That-
with humans, but human
Yeah.
beings that are also flawed as well. And they may
Yeah.
be flawed through deep-seated trauma, as in
Yeah.
Sarah,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
cowardice or ego. And we
Yeah.
see all those facets of human nature in this, and how people either work together or don't in an incredibly horrible
Yeah.
situation. And I
Well,
think the idea of
yeah.
going beneath is fucking genius. To physically
Absolutely.
going beneath, to understand what's underneath the
Yeah.
skin of these people.
Because if that happened in a tower block, it wouldn't have the same resonance.
No, no.
So watching the movie again last night, which I obviously did, I realized that it's very much a metaphor for a descent into madness.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
In a similar way that
Sarah
Psycho is. If you,
is-
you know,
She never got over the fact that her man was killed with
Yes.
rods for his fucking head in the car. And then, her so-called best friend, who may or may not be shagging her late husband, decides to take her on this trip to get her out of herself. What's the motive there then? Is it kind of some kind of, feminine revenge story going on here? So you got that sort of little subtext that isn't very apparent the first time you watch it, but when you watch it again, you suddenly see, is there some ulterior motive about this? Taking your grieving best friend down into the depths of what apparently is hell. Why?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that remains unsaid in this film, which I think is a really good aspect as well, because, again, one of the worst things you can do is over-explain things in a horror film and
Yeah.
overly, have all this exposition, which you don't need. There are certain things that are hinted at in this film, which we never really understand the truth of, which is much more unsettling. And that's not lazy writing. That's very deliberately left
clever.
unsaid, which is much more, creates a much more satisfying and disturbing psychodrama that's playing out. And I think, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
It is about a descent into madness in the same way, discussed this with Barbie before, but, when we talked about Psycho is the same thing. If you, obviously that's an incredibly famous film, but if you look at it closely, physically, it's a descent. We start in the sky in Phoenix, and the last shot is a swamp. We've literally plummeted the depths. It's a very, very cleverly visually clever film, and I think that this film is too, in a different way, but it's very, very visceral. It ticks all those kind of jump scare things of a modern film, but it has these very clever, more metaphorical aspects of a kind of more old school horror film. In some ways, it's a psychological descent into despair.
Animals. Hundreds of them.
Yeah, so I just want to talk about the characters for a second, in particular Sarah, who's this sort of protagonist, really, even though
Yeah.
it's kind of an ensemble piece. But so she has. I think what's really interesting is that she suffered this loss,
Hmm.
um, this this accident or whatever. So and obviously key to that is that she's lost a child, which I'm not a parent myself, but I would never wish that on anybody. It must be the most the greatest pain anybody can ever go through. It's an intolerably horrible situation, and this is what we're
I
presented
can't imagine.
with at the beginning, and
Mm,
it's very visceral in that sense. We understand this, and it's not a kind of Disney sort of oh well, I've lost a child and that's what I'm going through. It feels very real, and
mm,
we understand her pain and her suffering and her flaws
yeah,
and her guilt as well. And I think what's
yeah,
fascinating about it is that, Neil Marshall takes this idea and places her with this bunch of lunatics who want to explore these caves and all this kind of
mm,
stuff into this dangerous situation. And as dangerous as that is, and as fraught that is with emotion and backbiting and all the, because I think what he does as well as anything is that in a similar sense to, say, John Carpenter's The Thing, we are thrown
mm,
together. These people are thrown together with their egos and their cowardice and whatever faults they have, and they try and amble through this situation. Now that would be dangerous enough on its own. Suddenly they come across these inbred cave dwellers called the crawler, or that we end up calling the crawlers, and
yeah,
but also it's the fact that Sarah is suffering this loss of a child,
mm,
but we are forcing her underground into these very claustrophobic womb-like structures. It's almost
hmm,
like we're forcing her to relive this nightmare over and over again.
yeah,
It's kind of
mm,
making it's a dangerous situation. It's a horrific situation, but it's also seems to be mocking her as well. It's mocking her guilt, her loss
yeah.
by
Well,
making
there's
her
a
crawl through these. There's all these kind of
yeah, yeah, yeah.
physical
No, I
allusions to childbirth.
sure, but there's also another subtext is that her best friend, whose name I can't remember, um, the one uh, had actually had a bit of a thing going on
Yeah,
with
yeah, yeah,
her late partner. But that that's another subtext of horror. When you're down in hell, which is very cleverly lit, this movie that through the red light of flares or the green lights of glow sticks or the infrared, you're totally immersed in this underground world. There's no sense of any escape from it, and I think that's a very powerful thing because normally there's always a way out. There's always somebody coming to rescue you. And in this movie, I suppose, can I do spoilers? No, I can't
yeah,
really.
yeah.
Can
No, you can. That's fine. It's this, it's
I? All right,
20 years
but
old.
but at the very moment she finds herself outside of it, and then oh God, it's a dream. I'm back in the lying on the bed of bones again. It's like end shot. That really fucked me up, to be honest, watching that because. I have bad dreams where I always wake up and think, "Ooh, phew, that was only a dream." But this is like she really thinks she's got out. She's walking down the road and she gets in the car. Thank God, she throws up, blah, 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 and she turns around and there's her best friend who's dead, covered in blood next to her. Oh, fuck. And then she's back. And she's trapped in this hellish, and it is hell, isn't it? It's a metaphor for hell. It's Dante's whatever circle he chose to come out with. I think one of the things that works so much better for me about this movie is that there's no A-list stars in it. If it was Angelina Jolie going down there as Sarah, it's like, oh, fuck up. You know you're going to survive. I don't know any of the actresses in this movie, and that gives it a terrible realism. You know, that you care so much more if it is somebody. If it's Sandra Bullock or Demi Moore, I don't really give a fuck, to be honest, because you're A-list, you're going to make it. You know, you're not going to die in the first fucking. But no, it's very, on every level, this is a very, very clever movie. You know, plot-wise, visually, character. I don't know. I think it's underrated, but I read Roger Ebert, you know, the film critic, the late film critic. He loved this movie. He really raved about it, you know, which is very rare coming from somebody as cynical and as worldly as the late Roger. He said, this is fucking brilliant. It's everything I want from what we have to call a horror movie.
Well, I think most American theatrical versions of this film at the time, they went out with a slightly different ending.
Oh,
but they
really?
cut kind of the grimmer aspects of the ending. You know, here.
Oh, was it what she ends up in the car and drives off?
Yeah. I mean, I think in the American version, the sort of cut version is that, you know, it's alluded that she, you know, that's it, she goes. Whereas obviously over here, that's not going to fly, and it's much grimmer, you know, disturbing take on that, you know.
That again is what makes this movie fucking brilliant. You know, why go for the Hollywood fucking ending? Hey, she made it. Great. She'll be back for the sequel. Okay, there is a sequel to The Descent, which I haven't actually watched. Have you?
It's not very good. It's not very good. Spoiler alert.
You've seen it.
Very good. I don't rate it. I think everybody with Neil Marshall, you know, obviously he's done one or two things now, but I think everybody bangs on about Dog Soldiers, which I don't dislike, but I don't think it's as great a film as everybody makes it out to be. It's always kind of one of these like top 10 horror films that a lot of horror films really like, films really like.
No,
I don't
I
think
wouldn't put it in my top.
I don't think it's a patch on this. It's nowhere near.
No, it's not, because it doesn't have the emotional resonance that this movie does, which is what we've been talking about. You know, it's not just 6 chicks trapped underground. You know, that's what Hollywood would do. No, there's something about this that it does elevate it somewhere else, and it is allegorical. It is metaphoric. You know, and Dog Soldiers is okay, but it doesn't have that resonance. It doesn't have that. Maybe it's that feminine aspect that makes this movie so powerful. The interplay between all of these women, everyone, I can't remember all of their names, obviously, but everyone has their own character that adds to this terrible tale, you know, whether it's sort of female arrogance in wanting to, you know, name your own fucking underworld cave, or it's grieving, or it's just I'm along for the ride because I'm your best friend, or I'm the sort of daredevil one that does jumping off cliffs and hasn't got a man, or anything. You know, there's so much to it, and I think it's I just think it's a very underrated movie, you know, and it's I find it wonderfully reassuring that it is English and it was made on a very, very low budget these days. And it has a great poster as well. The poster, you know, the skull face poster, very clever. I think I sent it to you in a message earlier. But it's the silhouettes of these 6 women forming a skull shape. You know, and it says, "Scream your last scream." That is up there with "In space, no one can hear you scream." Similar thing. Great poster, great movie. Maybe there are similarities between this movie and Alien. You know, Alien was guys in space being sort of outgunned by a chick. But the guy in this one, he gets popped off in the first reel. You know, it's like, wow, okay, bye-bye. I've got to say, you know, watching it again, the first 10 minutes, it's like some kind of weird girly flick. we're all getting pissed and having a good time, and like, yeah, okay, this is like frat house, whatever, And then suddenly it's like, oh, we've actually got to get up now, sober up, and do this fucking thing because she has told us we got to do it.
But
And it's like,
it's also, like I say, it's also not afraid. I'm not entirely. I'm not entirely sure you would get. I don't think you'd get a Hollywood version of this, or if you did, it wouldn't be as good because I think they would immediately fall into the trap of presenting us with 5 perfect Mary Sue characters who are just going to sort everything out and are completely faultless. That's
perfect
not what this.
makeup.
Yeah, this has got more in common, like I said, with something like John Carpenter's The Thing. So that The Thing is male, macho, the how those kind of faults manifest themselves when placed under a dangerous situation, and how really that macho bullshit counts for nothing at the end of the day because nobody knows who anybody is. And I think it's very similar to that, in that it's not. I'm not saying that this film is trying to deride kind of female or is misogynist, because it's not at all. But it's simply presenting us with realistic human beings and all their faults and all their foibles, and not entirely likable human beings at the end of the day. But that is not the point. Why? Surely, as human beings, we should be able to empathize and sympathize with people, even if we don't particularly like them that much, because they're in a horrible situation. What we're going to do? We're going to go to like a war-torn country and decide who lives, whether we like them personally or not. It's beyond that. In a similar way to Blair Witch Project, none of those, the 3 main people in that, they're not particularly people I would hang about with. But I don't want them to suffer what they suffered in that film because they are fellow human beings.
That's the thing I have about Hollywood movies, that everyone that is in some, perilous situation in a Hollywood movie, you're always rooting for the good-looking guy who's going to save it, or the good-looking wife, and the cute little fucking kids that unfortunately don't get killed. And
you're doing this film.
But it's just, I don't know. I don't often sort of praise to the heavens or the hells, whatever, a movie, but this one I really think is something really seriously fucking special. And I don't know what the general, reviews of it were when it came out, but I just did read Roger Ebert's review this morning, and I thought that is brilliant because he's seen everything, and he's reviewed everything. It's like blah, 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 blah. And I often gauge what I like. I see what he says and I think, you know what, you're fucking clever, man. You've actually said exactly what I think, that this isn't that worthy, but he says this one is unique. And that's how wonderful, how rare to find a horror movie, if it does have to fit into that genre, that is actually unique. A kill list is kind of pretty horrific, as is Eden Lake. That's another one, maybe for discussion at some point.
I rate both of those films, particularly Kill List.
I mean, that genuinely terrifies me because I was bullied by guys like that when I was at secondary modern school, and it's this unstoppable hatred of someone who is different socially. Anyway, blah de blah. But I don't know. It's just
no. I mean, with The Descent, I think the reason, the reason the characters I think are great because they're on many levels quite unlikable, and I think also as well, it's my personal thing, but it's this. I've always struggled with this idea of dangerous sports. I don't understand why they're why they're given the precedent that they are. It's kind of like, it's okay to do these dangerous sports which have a knock-on effect of possibly having to get air sea rescue out or ambulance or, stretched NHS out to sort your situation out when you've just decided to do this stupid thing because you think it makes
Yeah.
you look great, when
Yeah.
the same courtesies are not really applied to a heroin addict who is just doing something dangerous and stupid as well. It's kind of like this idea, what? It's not heroin, so but it's still stupid. It's still a dangerous sport. You're placing yourself
Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
danger. And I don't,
Okay.
so the media, from the get-go, I'm thinking, I don't like these people. But it's,
No,
but
I mean, I feel the same. I mentioned earlier, A Lonely Place to Die. And it's the same principle that, this group of people go off to do this ridiculously stupid sort of rock climbing thing. But the twist is they're being picked off one by some lunatic with a fucking AK-47. And it's all in the Scottish Highlands and it's low budget. And that works. But it's like Deliverance. This movie is like Deliverance as well.
yeah.
If I had to, this movie is like Deliverance, Alien, and The Thing, bundled up together. What was the movie I saw last year, I think, called either Fall or The Fall? It's these two dumb American chicks that decide to climb this hideously high radio tower in the middle of the fucking desert somewhere. Have you not seen that one?
Nope.
Oh, it's a real ball tightener because they actually get to the top of this. It's like 2,000 feet up, and they climbed up, because they're stupid and they're young. And one of them's recovering after her boyfriend fell to his death when they were mountain climbing. So what's the cure for that, honey? Oh, we're going to climb the biggest fucking radio tower in the middle of the fucking desert. Brilliant. They get to the top, and of course the shit hits the fan. There's no way down because half of the ladder's disintegrated. They're stuck there. Vultures are coming in. Woo, woo, woo.
I'm kind of hypocritical in a way because I have a thing about I get exploration. I understand exploration, and I think it's a really fascinating part of humanity. That we've done this. The pioneers. So whether you're going to the North Pole or the South Pole, discovering new masses of land and things like that, or to take that even further, like the Apollo moon landings. I'm a big sucker for that. I love all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, I just roll my eyes a bit. When it comes to things like Everest, is that mountain any better because you've been up there? I don't. Why? Or why did you do it? Because it's there. Well, that's not good enough.
No,
not good enough.
It's like a Lewis Carroll answer, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why did you do it? Well, because it's there. Well, there's a dog turd on the pavement. I don't have to step in it because I know it's there. I avoid it. But there's something about it is primarily a male thing that we have to assert our masculinity by doing something ridiculously fucking stupid. And, Edmund Hillary, he did whatever, and Neil Armstrong. Yeah, okay. But YouTube is full of these stupid videos of stupid people doing stupid things and then having a terrible mishap. It's like, oh no, I feel so sorry for you.
You know what? I'll watch every single one of them as well.
I know, but this is how sad we are, Andrew. It's like, come on. But it's fascinating to watch stupid people doing stupid things. When they attempt to do something and it fails terribly and they fall on their arse in a crocodile-infested river or something, that's amusing because it's not me. I'm in my flight in Bayswater. I don't give a fuck. But no, again, this is not a masculine-orientated movie, and that's what makes it more powerful for me.
No, but I think what's interesting and one possible.
Well, if it was six guys doing the same thing, would it have the same resonance?
But this is what I mean. I'm not sure whether this was intended. I'm just suggesting it as a possible reading. But isn't it possible that what we're doing with this film? Yes, these are interesting female characters, but essentially, are they not trying to, and this again is a commentary on reality and misogyny within society, but are they not trying to be more, at least initially, trying to present more male attributes? And by doing that, are they not showing us how ridiculous they are? Not those as people, but in terms of how we view masculinity and these kind of macho
Why
sort
would
of
they do that?
behaviors.
Well, I think certainly the lady whose name I can't fucking remember again, the sort of
Juno.
Juno, she has the masculine quality, if you like. You know, she wants to prove herself. She can put a name on a previously undiscovered underworld thing. But the others are almost like ciphers, aren't they? There's the daredevil crop-haired girl who likes, you know, bungee jumping or whatever it is. But the other two, I don't really have any context for them. And the strange thing watching the movie is once they've been submerged in blood and muck and filth and everything else, it's very hard to tell actually who's who. Which one am I watching now? Oh, it's the one with the dark hair. Okay, that's Juno. Okay, so there's something dodgy about her. But the other, apart from Sarah, the lead, the other four are really kind of not fodder. That's cruel, but you don't really get a great sense of who or why. You know,
I
well, maybe we don't need
that. That's a kind of, you know, that's shorthand that a lot of people do, and I think that can work effectively as well. You can't. Sometimes you have, like George Romero was very good at that. His zombies, they weren't obviously they weren't characters as such, but they were caricatures. You know, particularly Dawn of the Dead. You know, you've got these are representatives of American icons, if you like, the bride, the you know, all this kind of stuff, all these kind, the nurse, all these kind of aspects of American society which we can then satirize. You know, so I think that there's aspects of that, but also I think with, you know, you mentioned, you kind of touched upon it there, but I think whatever they're bringing to this situation, whatever their faults are, whatever their personalities are, whatever their arrogances are, cowardices, egos, all this kind of stuff, once you're so far below and you're in danger and you're covered in blood and shit or whatever, that is a great leveler. You're none of those things are important. None of it matters. Of course, it matters in terms of how you might react to other people in that situation. But whatever the bullshit you're carrying to forge your way through in the outside world above means nothing. Doesn't mean anything.
Another great fucking metaphor.
Yeah.
But you know, the other four, if you like, we don't really need to know a backstory about them. We care about Sarah, and we have dubious thoughts about Juno because of a possible liaison with the late hubby. But the rest, the other girl who looks after Sarah, she's the carer.
Yeah.
You know, but the rest is like, I'm not quite sure. But anyway, let's talk about the crawlers. You know, because If this movie was made in 1984, I would be one of them because of my own training, because of XTRO and, you know, JEDI and stuff. And I just thought, whoa, what a shit job that must have been. Because they, not only are they really underground, although, as Rod said, a lot of the set was CGI'd or whatever.
Yeah.
But they built, Rod and his company, Armadillo, did build the actual rock formation. And he did say that they were actually creating this in confined spaces. So to be virtually blind and almost completely naked, crawling through these sort of spaces, I would have found very, very difficult. So I have a lot of admiration for the guys who played the crawlers. And I thought the makeup, you know, with the eyeless eyes and the gaping mouths and the teeth. And then you get their backstory, that they've been stranded underground in this sort of Dante-esque hell for all these years where they don't need to see anything, but their hearing is totally sharp. And there's been other expeditions down there. They find the cave drawings, they find a pickaxe, they find elements of what happened to these fucking people. And then there's a whole field of bones, you know, the sort of horrible, crunchy, clicky as they, ugh. But the briefly cut crawlers, they're there, they're gone. That's scary. And that's one of the things that was so memorable about Alien. You very rarely saw it. You know, you didn't have to get a full kind of body glimpse.
Well, I think, you know, this film, whatever we want to talk about in terms of social commentary and its, you know, it's more intelligent aspects, it also falls into that sort of horror subgenre of the cannibalistic inbreds, you know, going at it, you know, and so you've got lots of films. So, you know, you've got Wes Craven's People Under the Stairs. But the other one it really reminded me of is a film called Deathline, which is a British film from the early 70s, which is incredible, really. It's the London Underground, and it's a similar setup where when the underground was being constructed, obviously they used lots of working class labourers, and there was some sort of accident and they just got left there. And they've kind of bred over the years into these interbred cannibals, and they're kind of dying out, but they're popping people off. But it's a brilliant, brilliant film. It's incredible. It's got Donald Pleasence.
You have to write that down.
Yeah.
Deathline.
It's called Deathline. Yeah.
Have I never seen that? Yes. Okay.
But I also love the fact that because, as with these kind of creatures, you know, they tend to be. Obviously, there's also Bone Tomahawk as well, which is incredible. It's kind of like it's brilliant Western horror. If you've not seen it, it's incredible. But I will warn you, there's a very, very, very brutal scene in that, which takes some bit of preparation for. But it's a brilliant film about sort of cannibalistic inbreds. But I think the other kind of irony again. You know, these are creatures that are blind. They've been lost there, and they've become cannibalistic but it's because they are inbred. And again, that's another mockery of Sarah's situation. These creatures are breeding like rabbits, and she's lost a child. You know, it's another reminder of her horrible situation.
Yeah. I mean, are they all asexual? Is there a female crawler? I don't recall seeing one.
There must have been at some point because they're
exactly. But that again, it's an ambiguity that I find really appealing. That in lesser hands, they could make a sequel. You know, the crawler story. My name was John, and I went down into the caves, and all of a sudden, I was stuck. No, it could be horrible.
But also, it's kind of that idea again, going back to that. You know, whatever bullshit you're carrying around with you in the outside world, once you're there, how quickly are you either going to fall victim to this or become part of it? You know, because crawlers, like you said, we don't know. They seem to be asexual. They seem to be sort of featureless. They seem to be, you know, of one thing. You know, they're just crawlers. They're not individual at all. So it's kind of like that idea of taking that to the nth degree. You're coming with all this. You've got a personality, or this on the outside. Once you're underground and once you're in this situation, you're nothing.
That all goes.
Part of the crowd. You're a victim.
All you want to do is to eat to survive.
Yeah.
You know what you just said reminds me of Lord of the Flies.
Yeah.
To me, that is a horror movie. And
yes.
At some point, I'd love to talk about that one. I don't mean the ghastly American fucking remake. I mean the Peter Brook black and white film in England. Because I read that, you know, A-level at school, and I'm 17. I'm reading this. I think, why the fuck have we been given this? This is horrible. This is terrifying. And ever since then, I've always wondered what would happen to those guys when they got rescued by the Navy and they got back to Blighty. how would they revert back into being, did one of them become a serial killer? Did one of them become an accountant? It's something I tried to get onto William Golding's estate to write a sequel, and they wouldn't let me do it. But it's this notion of once you put a group of people in a terrible, unprivileged situation, who's going to revert to what? And what's happened with the Crawl is that they've all reverted, regardless of their background, their characters, just one hunting, killing machine. That's pretty fucking terrifying. That is like the Alien, isn't it? The game. There's no question about morality or indecision. They're just out to kill. It's like feral cat, They don't give a fuck about what that mouse is thinking at the moment you bite it, They just got to do it.
I was just thinking the reason I was on my phone, I was just trying to check, but I couldn't find it. But there was a Channel 4 documentary from a number of years back where they literally sent a group of people to an island, a desert island, to try and survive. Obviously, they sent a camera crew and they got rudimentary supplies, but very quickly it turned into Lord of the Flies. Literally, I mean, they had in so much so that they had a kind of marketing idea for the show, and they were going to put it out with this title. They had to change the title and completely change the marketing and the way, because the behavior of the characters on this island changed so severely, so negatively. So you had male cliques instantly forming into these macho gangs. The women sort of islanders quickly left. They got out of there as soon as possible.
Right.
You had this macho bunch of male characters literally turning into the gang in Lord of the Flies. There was a cameraman there who they find out was homosexual, so they started taking the piss out of him because he was homosexual, because he liked men and not women. It just turned into the worst aspects of humanity possible. It was a horrible situation.
But they managed to film it all, surprisingly.
They got a show out of it, but it was a horrible situation, and there were lots of people went into kind of trauma afterwards.
Lord of the Flies is about class.
Yeah.
Americans can't do that, and that's why the ghastly coloured remake they did was appalling. But Americans don't understand class in England. They don't understand the hierarchy of how important, well, maybe still is, not as much as it used to be, but class was the ruling element of English society. You're either working class, middle class, or upper class, and you don't fucking mix. Simple as that. They put them all on a desert island. Obviously, who's going to rise to the top? And that was the whole essence of the book. And that was what's so terrifying, is that the guy who bullied you at school is now going to bully you on a fucking desert island. But, anyway, I think all of these movies that I love share a common denominator, whether it is The Thing, Alien, Lord of the Flies. But that's what makes a great movie great for me. It's not, jump scares and slashers and all that stuff. I don't know, maybe, The Descent should be reevaluated, or is that pointless? It's out there.
I think it did, at the time, it did well critically, and it got some notoriety, but I don't think it did brilliantly at the box office. But I think it's picked up much more of a cult following as it's gone on, and I think it's much more appreciated now than it was. And I was one of those people that didn't necessarily appreciate it when I first saw it, and I really do now. I really rate it. I think it's one of the best British horror films of the 21st century. It's fantastic.
Yeah. There we go. Thank you, Neil Marshall.
Yes. Well, it just remains for me to say thank you very much, Tim, for coming back on again. I hope you've enjoyed it.
I did very much indeed.
And I hope you enjoy your weekends and your conventions and all this kind of jazz. And I hope the CD does well as well.
Thank you very much.
But it just remains for me to say, join us next time. Make yourself at home. You look like you're dying for a nice cup of tea for terror.
And remember, my friend, future events such as these will affect you in the future.